Good morning. My name is Jamie Burgess, and I'm excited to be here to talk to you today at NAB about the next best action for media from Valorem Reply. So let's get to it. So before we jump into any demo, I want to take a step back and just talk about our end-to-end view of the media and entertainment ecosystem. It's clear you are all managing a massive content library of live and on-demand stuff, managing unpredictable demand spikes, compliance rights models, and engagement signals that just change in real time, that can scale and respond elastically to the demands of the media industry, whether it be changes in the geopolitical climate or trending videos or whatever else is around the corner for AI. You need to be able to respond and react. And this is where Microsoft fits in perfectly. They have this concept they announced at Ignite last year that sits across Foundry IQ, Fabric IQ, and Work IQ. It understands your business through Work IQ and how you operate. It understands your data through Fabric IQ, and it has an AI platform natively baked into Azure called Foundry IQ, where your data sits and resides all within your existing boundaries that you've spent decades building and securing and managing to this point. So what we've built with Next Best Action for Media is the ability to extract the next best action by looking at data with a role-based lens, whether it be driving subscription, whether it be increasing ad revenue, driving deeper engagement, identifying insights and these threads to pull on, and then using a hypothesis engine to prove out that there is causation and correlation, and then roll that out quickly to an entire organization. And some of the key things we're going to look at is how organizations typical challenges around visitor trends and average dwell time and behavior analytics. And so let's jump into it. So here's next best action for media. And this was born, by the way, from a conversation we started in the gaming industry. And we've built a similar solution for gaming because they have such an enormity of telemetry across gaming engagement, gaming telemetry itself, the engineering data, transactional data from downloadable content purchases, their subscription models, their support tickets, sentiment analytics, you name it, there is so much data. And so we want to help them try and derive this next best action through all the noise. And so we've done the same for media. So the reason I showed this login page is because, like I mentioned with Foundry and keeping your data and secure within the perimeter that you've already spent so much time building, Entra is natively built into this. And I personally think that identity is making a bit of a renaissance because all of the agents that you see from this point onward carry something called OBO on behalf of. It's a security thing that's built into all of the agents that are created within the Microsoft ecosystem. So the agents have the same access as the user. So when you do a search for something, across your organization, you want to make sure that those people are picking up the right data, the right insights, and whether it's regionally locked or whatever reason, the security is baked into everything that you're doing. So we now found ourselves in the NBAM dashboard. And what's going on here? So on the right-hand side, we see a couple of widgets and charts that are showing some interesting things. And back from my days in the MSM business, our goal was always to look at the content, the algorithm, look at the engagement, look at the ad revenue, and look at the user behavior. And ultimately understand as much as we could about the users to make sure the users that visit or the users that skim or read or the deeply engaged users are getting everything they need to stay as long as possible and ultimately increase ad revenue. So now we've established that, let's go and we talked about this role-based lens. Effectively, AI can look at my data. So I'm going to go and set my objective. Okay, so here I've increased my engagement by, my goal is to increase engagement by 10%. So now when AI runs over my data, it's not just looking at something generically, air quotes, interesting, it's looking at anything that can help me grow my engagement by 10%. So first I'm going to kick off, a typical prompt that's out of box, right? So the problem with asking AI agents questions typically is you take a preconceived notion of what you're looking for. And that's where we want to try and get away from. And I'll explain that in a second. But just to kick the process off, let's look at average dwell time by content category. So what's happening here, and this is synthetic data, right? We don't have access to a live customer environment, but we're actually using synthetic data that's been generated by AI. And so here we see the orchestrator, whose job is first to understand what the question is, and then assemble their team of other AI sub-agents. So in this example, it's going to add to a group chat the Fabric data agent. So it's orchestrated, hey, Fabric data agent, what have you got on this data? What can you find me? And so it's going to go off and it's going to search through all of the monstrous amounts of data that's out there. Now, one thing to note is, whilst this is going and questioning, this is me triggering it. This thing also happens every day at 4 a.m. before I even come into the office, and I'll explain why in a second. So it's providing its insights. The executive summary from the orchestrator is wrapping that up. And then it will decide next steps, which if it finds something interesting, it will bring the insight agent in, and then it will bring the widget agent in as well. Okay, so here we have lifestyle and opinion categories show 6% engagement premium for ad revenue optimization. So what I love about how AI does the research here is it's not just looking at something, it's looking at something and comparing it to other things. So in the gaming industry, it would look at game A and it would say, hey, game A is doing really well in this thing, but game B and C aren't. Let's think about how we can use the strategies in game A and game B and C. And in this example, it's basically saying lifestyle and opinion content are your top engagement drivers, holding attention 3 to 6% longer than other categories. So do we need to tweak the algorithm? Do we need to review that maybe per our engagement model types or user types? So let's have a look. So what's happened in here is we have a list of all the insights that are being generated, right? So there's a lot of them because there's a lot of data, right? And so anything over 70% will be triggering an insight, and then we can look into it more deeply. So let's see. Opinion content achieves near lifestyle engagement despite typically lower traffic. Okay, so what should we do? Launch expert takes series in tech and entertainment categories using opinion editorial format, first-person perspective, provocative angles, debate-worthy positions, publish 3 or 4 pieces a week for 30 days and measure the dwell time. Perfect. So now the goal is to test that hypothesis. So this doesn't mean that we're going to get the results we want. That's a theory that AI has suggested. So we need to go and test it out. So we're going to run test hypothesis. Now, here is where the live experience sort of could go further if we wanted to, but it's obviously a lot harder because we don't have a live environment. So here, this is just a proof of concept at this point onward. Is the real part is the hypothesis agent will be spun up in Azure and it will sit and watch the data. The proof of concept is, which we're doing with gaming organizations, and we like to do with media as well, is like we said before, data plus AI, tools plus AI. Here, we've got the data, we've derived the insight, we're now doing the hypothesis. The next step is to decide what action to take. So in this example, right now, I would have our human editors go and create 3 to 4 pieces of content. Whether they use AI or not, that's their choice, and company principles and all that. But what we're saying here is this is where effectively an action would need to be taken to prove or disprove. But what could happen is we could very easily automatically farm out this process to an AI agent to go and create the necessary things, take the necessary action, and then watch the results. Of course, depending on your organization, you may not want to run discounts over 10% by AI, or you may not want to run certain things and make sure they align with your company principles. So in your group chat of agents and your human in the loop, which I cannot stress is so important in this process, is to make sure that you validate the tests and the results and the next best action, but you're being given those things in discrete buckets as you go along your journey. So in this example, I'm going to say I want a test group of 500 using the crawl. That's maybe not big enough. Maybe let's do 10%. And I'm going to initiate the test. And so now what it does, it goes and creates a hypothesis. So these ones have just been spun up, so they're going to be fresh, and so they're still looking for data. So these ones they've been running for a little while, so let's have a look at some of them. So this one says, skimmers to readers migration could unlock 8,000 in untapped revenue, meaning if we move people from those who just like scroll the mouse wheel and skim across the platform to maybe more detailed readers. And so in this example, the hypothesis tracking against this one is implement an exit intent content recommendation and related story module specifically for skimmers. Okay, so we're doing an A/B test on headlines to see what that does. And so all we're doing is we're watching it, and the agent that sits inside of Azure Foundry is able to take those actions, is able to watch those actions and report. However, again, like we said a second ago, it would be really interesting to be able to have those actions taken by AI. As we think about allowing AI into our systems and our tools, we obviously want to build a trust model. We want to consider the Microsoft principles of security, privacy, compliance, ethics, responsible AI, etc. And so we want to bake that into everything we do. So we have inside of the group chat, inside the hypothesis agents, it's very easy to add your minimum requirements or your gates or your necessities in there to keep an eye and watch over what's going on. So just to recap, we've taken an enormity of data that sits in Fabric, and we have put a Fabric data agent on top of it. We've then got this dashboard that is able to then, an orchestrator agent can look at that data very easily and ask a question, get an answer. It also runs every morning at 4 a.m., so it generates more and more insights that are effectively these threads to pull on. And instead of staring at Excel spreadsheets for hours and maybe finding a diamond in the rough occasionally, is actually allowing AI to surface up those threads to pull on, then go test those threads by running a hypothesis, deriving the next best action, and then in the future we'll have be able to deploy MCP servers or agent-to-agent conversations to be able to go and take action on those. And so then you get to a point where you can even market to a user of one. You can customize your entire web experience. You don't just have to have an approximation and bucketed users. You could actually have a deep matrix that's highly complicated of reader types, engagement types, content types, whether it's video, podcast, audio, written content, etc., and matrix that against the user types, their geos, their interests, and more. Okay, so just to recap, we've got this idea of role-based objectives and insights where a user can provide their objective or KPIs or whatever it may be, and the AI will be able to look over the data with that lens. It gives you a full 360 view of all of your data that you ingest into Fabric. And again, because Fabric is so powerful, it's very easy to add multiple sets and data sources and SQL databases and all these third-party tools that are available to you. And then run a hypothesis in one click. It's so simple to then simply spawn that hypothesis agent and then having looking at your data. So finally, I want to wrap up with how you can reach out and work with Valorem Reply and Microsoft. We'll support the deployment. We will work with you to assess and get you early access to all the agentic AI capabilities that you've seen today. You'll also be able to help provide input into the product. This isn't a solution that is like locked and loaded. This is a solution that we can carve out and shape for the media industry specifically. So scan the QR code, come chat to us, whatever it may be. We'd love to hear from you and see you and speak to you soon. Thanks.